It's a matter of great honor and privilege here today that I'm part of this August gathering here of eminent speakers. Uh, I will be giving my talk over the next about 15 minutes on what has been the India's response to this conflict, and also briefly about the manifestation of Operation Ganga. I'll use some maps in my presentation to make it slightly more easier to understand for our young researchers who are attending the program. Can we have the first map, please? So we see this world of 2022, and what has been shaded in red are the areas which are in a great deal of turmoil today. The COVID endemic has played its own part, and in spite of that, you can have a look at the map and you can straight away understand how many hotspots are there in today's world. The South China Sea and the Chinese closer to Ladakh are a cause of concern to us. And one takeaway from what all is happening today is the most significant observation which I would like to make here has been the non-compliance to agreements, treaties, and laws, and a virtual ineffectiveness of the United Nations to fulfill its own charter. Because we have seen that United Nations in the present conflict has not been able to make any impact. And when it comes to India and China, it can be presumed that a similar situation is going to happen. You can remove the map now. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is our immediate concern right now. A war which could well have been avoided. As we stand today, there are more than 4,000 casualties in this war, both military as well as civil population. I'm reminded of a very interesting saying here. A war is initiated by leaders who hate each other and fought by people who don't even know each other. So this is what actually is happening here on the ground here. And before we understand the response of our country to this entire situation of Russia and its abstention from the voting in the United Nations, it is very important to go back to history. As we look back to history, we find that Russia has always been a trusted ally. They intervened in our conflict with Pakistan in 1965, which culminated in a ceasefire. It will also be important to reflect their role during the 1971 Indo-Pak War. It was at this time Russia and India signed a treaty of friendship and cooperation. The treaty was signed on 9th August 1971 by the foreign ministers of both the countries. And it was significant at that point of time because it, especially in the context of the United States, and it was very apparently displayed and conveyed at that point of time that in the event of a war, in case the US is going to intervene, Russia is going to come to our support. So now, having understood this historical background, what is the impact? Before I come to the decision which the Indian government has taken and try to justify or not justify that decision, it is important to know how this conflict is going to impact us. It is going to impact us certainly, and especially at the defense equipment supplies. We are largely dependent upon our military hardware from Russia, especially we are in the process of receiving the S-400 air defense missile systems from Russia. The armored might of the Indian Army, the T-90 tank and the T-72 tank are also Russian origin. And recently, when Putin came to India, a very important agreement of establishing a domestic manufacturing unit of AK-203 rifles was taken up. And taking us further, the BrahMos missile is a project which is a joint venture between the Russians and us. And today we have received a 375 million US dollars order from the Philippines. So it is a very important aspect which which one has to keep in mind when one takes a decision in the interest of the nation. When we talk of Navy, the only aircraft carrier we have with us is of Soviet origin. The entire spares management of this entire thing is from the Russians. You talk of the Air Force, we have 272 Sukhoi aircrafts, a fleet of MiG-21s, MiG-29 orders already placed on Russia. We have a shortfall of 12 squadrons of the Air Force. So we are largely dependent upon these aircrafts which are going to come from Russia. And I mean, I can actually go on and on this aspect. Today, a huge range of missiles and ammunition have been ordered by the Indian Army from Russia. And we really cannot break away this umbilical cord we have with Russians. And why am I actually saying it is, you have to see it from the perspective of the life cycle of an equipment. If an equipment is inducted into service, for example, in the Indian Army, its lifespan is from anything from 30 to 40 years. So unless you establish a manufacturing process, we are calling it Atmanirbhar Bharat, and Ram Madhavji has very correctly assessed that unless we have a changeover to the manufacturing in our own country for the next at least 2 decades, we will continue to be dependent on Russia. And especially when the Chinese are in our backyard, we are facing them. How can we cut off this entire logistic support which the Russians are providing us today? And I've just picked up a few statistics to press home my argument and my point here. Since 2014, India has undertaken more than 55% of defense imports from Russia. It's almost 70% of our equipment is of Russian origin. And Russia's exports overall is 23% to India. So The stance which the Indian government has taken, it is a bipartisan stand based on its own national interest and its own security. It is neither pro-Russian nor pro-American. It is pro-Indian. So, if you have a look at what I have just you statistically proved to you, you will understand why we continue to support indirectly the stand which has been taken by Russia. And if you look at what Moscow has been supporting us over the years, as I talked about the 65 war, the 71 war, and also in the past, when Russia annexed Crimea, India again abstented itself at that point of time also. And in 1980, there was a UN resolution condemning the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. India had opposed that. So it has been a very close friendship with the Russians, and the way forward now is for us to be absolutely self-reliant, because that is the only way we can formulate our foreign policy. If we if we want to be seen as a nation of its own merit, a nation of its own standing, we have to be self-reliant. So this was my take as far as our response, and the issues I have focused predominantly on the defense aspects. There are energy and gas related issues also from where we are dealing with Russia. So that is, I have not elaborated that in much detail. Now I will move to Operation Ganga, a very important operation carried out by the government of India under the leadership of our Prime Minister. And we need to understand Ukraine today is home to 76,000 foreign students. And out of this entire 76,000 foreign students, the majority, approximately 20,000, are from India. And our children have gone there to study medicine, engineering, and business. And this educational institution which have come up in Ukraine are of a reasonably good standard.
Hello.
And they are the bone of economy of that country, pillar of economic strength, because from the revenues are being generated as far as Ukraine is concerned. So, a background of this entire operation, I wish to highlight a few factors. One factor is that even when the war was imminent and Ukraine was aware that the war is happening, it did very little to ensure the safety of the students who were studying in Ukraine. As a matter of fact, the universities announced online examinations during that point of time, which I feel was something which was not in the overall interest of the nations who are sending the students to this country. The second aspect is that when the students were being evacuated and reaching the borders of Poland and other nations, they were the kind of treatment which was given to them and being prevented to leave the country. So this was the genesis for Operation Ganga. Why Operation Ganga was actually necessitated was because it was realized by the government of India that unless a properly orchestrated operation is put into place, we will not be able to evacuate the students from Ukraine. So it all started with the first Indian government advisory being issued on 15th of November. And to remind you, the conflict started on the 24th of November. So 9 days prior to the conflict, the first advisory was issued by the embassy to the students as well as to the Ukrainian government for their evacuation. But surprisingly, till the airspace was closed, it was a period of 9 days. Only 4,000 students could get evacuated in that period of 9 days. So that was one window of opportunity which the government of India lost. Then on 28th of February, after the conflict had been on for about 4 to 5 days, the Ministry of External Affairs advised all Indian citizens of Ukraine to move and seek shelter on the western side of Ukraine because it was closer to the borders with the neighboring countries, and the conflict was basically centered on the eastern side. So, what the Ministry of External Affairs did, it set up multiple information dissemination and communication channels. Around the clock helpline, email, a website, a fax, Twitter, and all those aspects were utilized. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he made a phone call to the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, on 26th of February. And he impressed upon him the importance of evacuation of our students. Between 26th March and 26th February and 7th March, the Indian Prime Minister talked to Zelensky. He talked to Putin multiple times. So he was very emphatic in his calls. He was trying to impress upon them to make conditions conducive for the evacuation. The first flight thereafter took place on the 26th of February. And after 26th of February, till date, there have been more than 80 flights to actually bring all our students back home. There were meetings in New Delhi almost on a daily basis with the NSA and the Prime Minister. A stock of the situation was being taken, and the NDRF was also pressed into service. So you see the kind of efforts with the Indian government undertook. But here I would like to highlight the lessons learned. It is very important to understand that from this entire episode, though we may say that except for a loss of life of one student because of the conflict and one more student because of natural sort of reasons, we should feel very, very happy about it. But as a military man, I would see we must understand the lessons learned and try to improve our disaster management response when such a thing happens next time. So the first thing is the OODA loop. We were extremely slow in the OODA loop as far as the decision making was concerned. We, the first advisory being issued on the 15th of February, and the first flight taking off on the 26th. So it took us almost 11 days for the evacuation. So one thing was important, that we actually missed out on the OODA loop. Second aspect was uh, the diaspora, which is there in Ukraine, should have been activated at that point of time. A contact with all the students should have been made. The university should have been pressurized to stop their examinations and stop actually pressurizing our students from leaving the country. It was possible, it could have been done. And the third aspect, and the most important aspect, is that a proper expertise was not available in the embassy how to deal with the students. We need to have human relation experts, emotional intelligence experts who have the expertise to speak to students and assure them, make them confident that the government will evacuate them. Because the kind of interviews I was listening on the TV, the students were losing hope. So this sort of a communication should have been kept on, and I feel we have to improve upon this. And in the end, I would like to just mention that we are all aware what is happening in the world today. We have a symmetry with China, both in terms of military as well as economic. And a stage is now coming where the world is drifting towards that Cold War 2.0, I may call it. We are actually getting two blocks now, which are getting actually aligned. One is the United States and one is the Russia. Unfortunately, India cannot be a part of any of these blocks. So it is very important now, and I have stressed this point earlier. I will again stress it. It is very important now to take our own manufacturing, our own self-reliance in a war footing, on a war footing. The budgets have to be given. You do not start preparing your army when your enemy is at your doorstep. You know, we have actually done it as it happened with China. We were running to the United States to get equipment. We were running to Russia to get the spares. That is not the way we equip our armies today. We have to start from today itself. We have to make a pledge here. We have to understand that a military does not become stronger in a few months or days. It takes years. So this kind of self-reliance has to be built up in a country, because the future is not very good. The future in the world is going to lead towards conflicts, and we don't want the conflict in our own backyard. So this is my message to the government, to the people who matter, that it is high time now we shed the lethargy and we start having our own institutions in place. Thank you very much, sir. Jai Hind.